young woman with a bright future.
She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty, but also very smart.
Is the victim of a truly disturbing murder.
He'd been struck on the head many times.
It's kind of the horror story.
The body itself appeared to have been washed. Jewelry had been put on her after the fact.
She has been staged for this suspect's desires. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her?
Detectives hunt for a deranged killer.
We noticed bloodied palm print.
Police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
We could be looking for a serial killer.
Just when it looks like justice may never be served.
It was extremely frustrating.
A stunning discovery points to a murderer in their midst.
When we found out who it was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Less than an hour outside Los Angeles, Irvine, California is a peaceful community with a coastal vibe.
Irvine is very, very pretty. It is pretty much the hub of Orange County. The ocean's only 10 minutes away, and this is where everybody wanted to be.
Irvine has always been considered to be a very safe city and has not been known for violence.
On May 14th, 1979, Irvine's sense of safety is shattered when a man calls 911 to say he can't get a hold of his 22-year-old girlfriend, Savannah Anderson.
Earlier that day, her boyfriend went over to her residence to meet her at about 6 o'clock. He couldn't get any response at the door.
He went back home for a while, couldn't get a hold of her still.
He called the police department about 7:25 p.m. It was a welfare check. Her boyfriend indicated that she had not been feeling well, and so there was a concern that it could be a health issue. When the officer arrived, he met her boyfriend, Bill Mills, and another man, Ken Bergenson, who identified himself as her boss.
They explained they'd both come to the apartment to try to find out if she was okay because nobody'd been able to get a hold of her that day.
I was very fortunate to work with Savannah. Savannah was always prompt, and she didn't come that day. All day long, it was like trying to get a hold of her, no answers. By the end of the day, we were very concerned. Something might have happened because that wasn't like her.
The officer found the apartment was in fact locked up tight. There was no key available from the apartment office. The officer found out that a bedroom window nearby was unlocked from the inside. He was able to open that bedroom window.
When the officer made entry, he was able to see a woman with a lot of blood around her, lying in bed, towels wrapped around her face and head. She was cold to the touch.
Both Savannah's boyfriend and boss are taken to the station for questioning, while homicide investigators are called to the scene.
When I walked in, it appeared to me that there was a struggle, a fight, and it was very clear that she was attacked on the bed, and she laid on the bed for some time due to the amount of blood that had pooled in that area. A lot of blood splattering against the back of the wall of the headboard.
She also had towels over her face. After the towels were taken off, her face was found out to be beaten very severely, excessively.
The towels were significant. It tells you that the killer may have known her and didn't want to look at what they've done.
It appeared that the body of the victim had been beaten with something hard.
She had multiple defensive marks on her arms, her hands, nail marks around the neck area, which would indicate that she also had a ligature that had been placed around her neck.
The legs were slightly raised as if some sexual activity may have occurred there.
Perhaps she was the victim of a sexual assault.
The degree of violence to Savannah's body was unusual. Did somebody do it because they were angry at her? If they were angry at her, is that because they knew her, they loved her, they hated her?
Based on the state of the body, police believe Savannah was likely killed in the early hours of the morning. Looking closer, several details strike investigators as highly unusual.
Savannah had some jewelry on her. There was a necklace around her neck, and the clasp was at the front. There was also a watch on her arm that looked like it had just been put on there loosely.
We were surprised to see that those items were still intact on her based upon the brutality of her attacker. So it appeared that he may have just put those items back on her.
The body itself appeared to have been washed, as there's very little blood on the skin surface of the victim.
We noticed drag marks from the bed onto the carpet leading into the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, there was diluted blood with water around the sink area and also the bathtub.
She looked like she had been cleaned up and set in a particular position on the bed that was staged for this suspect's desires. And I think that was important to get an idea of what this type of person was willing to do to Savannah's body, put things on her, put clothes on her, whatever.
It was very unusual for any type of murder, in my opinion. It looks like somebody wanted to make it look like she was fine and nothing was wrong.
Police find some important clues the killer left behind.
We noticed bloodied palm print leading from the bedroom into the bathroom. Palm prints are identifiable just like fingerprints. There were smudged, bloodied fingerprints on the toilet seat.
They were basically the only way that we'd be able to find out who the killer might have been. There was no DNA at the time.
Detectives find no murder weapon or any sign of forced entry.
We made the determination that the killer may have been known by Savannah and let him in through the front door. Another theory was through an unlocked open window.
After finishing up at the scene, detectives break the news of Savannah's death to her loved ones.
The parents lived in Utah. When I spoke to Savannah's mother on the phone, she was devastated by this. It was her only child. It's probably hard for most people to realize, first of all, what it's like to lose a child, let alone the only child you have. Savannah's mother said Savannah had made a collect call to her about 10 o'clock the previous day on Mother's Day evening. They had talked on the phone for about 2 hours. Savannah was very happy, good mood. That must have made it even more so difficult.
When I found out what had happened to Savannah, we were all totally shocked. My heart just hurt so much. How very sad this beautiful young lady, her life was gone. It's very senseless, very, very hard to understand.
Born in 1956, Savannah Anderson grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and had big dreams.
She was 22 when she moved to Irvine. She came here looking for a better opportunity. She was very independent, and she wanted to do it on her own. I met Savannah when she was working here for Commercial Credit. Savannah was a secretary for the operations manager. She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty. I remember when people did come in the office, especially the men, she did attract attention.
Savannah was flattered, but she did have a boyfriend, Bill Mills, whom she met 3 months after moving to California.
She was more of a private person into herself as far as not one to just open up and tell everybody what she was doing. She was definitely on the shy side. When I found out what had happened to Savannah, I felt angry and just crushed and so hurt. My first thought was just how tragic this was. I just can't imagine.
It's kind of the horror story. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody close to her, somebody who knows her, somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her? When you have a brutal killing like Savannah's case, detectives immediately looked for the people that are close to her, her boyfriend,
The fact that Bill, the boyfriend, was the one who called the police, is he innocently calling the police here because he doesn't know that something had happened to her? Or is he the one who may have done it, so he contacted the police to say, gee, something might be wrong, with the hopes that the police will go ahead and discover the crime, and then say, well, it can't be the boyfriend because he called us here? Could it be almost a way out to try to point the finger away from you? It's just something you have to look into.
Coming up, police question the grieving boyfriend to see if he has something to hide.
His attorney advised him not to take a polygraph.
And detectives uncover more suspects.
Why is he here now at this time? That was suspicious.
Somebody was lying.
Another crime turns the investigation on its head.
This individual was responsible for 5 murders. Perhaps she was the victim of this killer.
And the perpetrator's identity leaves everyone in shock.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was.
Police investigating the gruesome murder of 22-year-old Savannah Anderson have their first suspect, her boyfriend, Bill Mills.
When you have a crime of passion where somebody is murdered, there are definitely times when a boyfriend who just got angry and upset did the crime.
The first thing we did was began meeting with Bill Mills so we could understand better about Savannah, his relationship.
Bill tells police he and Savannah started dating 6 months ago, and he was in love.
They had met each other in another apartment community. They had gotten along well.
He was about 9 years older than Savannah. In talking with him, had learned that he had just asked her to marry him.
Police are curious if something came up to disrupt the couple's plans for the future.
It was a large, violent crime scene. Did he do it because he was angry at her?
Bill tells investigators he last saw Savannah a day earlier on May 13th.
They had brunch together, and then he spent the day over at her apartment. During the interview with Bill Mills, we found out that Savannah and he did have sex that day. So that would be important later on in case there was semen found inside of her.
Bill told me on the 13th he left her apartment at about 10 p.m.
Once he did leave, what happened to him? Can anybody account for his activity after he apparently left her apartment?
He said he went home, he went to bed, and then to work the following day.
Bill says he and Savannah had plans on the 14th after they both got off work.
He went to her apartment about 6, knocked, couldn't raise her. He went back home for a while, then Bill Mills went ahead and contacted the police department.
Bill denies having anything to do with Savannah's death.
It appeared that Bill Mills was really in love with her, thought it was a very serious relationship. He was very happy with her.
Bill was cooperative. He tried to assist us as much as he could.
But there is one request Bill won't comply with.
There is a red flag. He was asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph. He contacted an attorney, and his attorney advised him not to take one.
We did ask if we could see his body, his hands, his arms, see if there's any indications of a struggle with anybody. But his body was clean. We asked him if we could go ahead and take his finger and palm prints. He agreed to let us do that.
It will be weeks before the results come in. In the meantime, detectives are forced to let Bill go. Next, they move on to another man in Savannah's life.
Part of the investigation and process was to meet with her boss, Ken Bergeson, who had been at the crime scene. In speaking with him, he said he had known her in Salt Lake and had offered her a job locally here.
Ken Bergeson also said that he kind of considered himself a father figure to her. He helped her move. They had talked many times, been out for drinks, been out for lunch and different things.
Could Ken have wanted more than a professional relationship with Savannah?
Was anything going on romantically in the present day?
I asked Ken where he was the night of May 13th, and he indicated that he was with his wife that whole evening.
We did contact the wife to verify that, and there's no reason to believe that he was anywhere but at his home that night.
After the interview, we asked Ken to submit his prints so they could be compared against the crime scene.
We just let him go home that night after the interview.
The police questioned each one of us in the office. I worked for Ken Bergerson at the time. He was just such a nice guy and so concerned about her. She was living by herself, and she was just so beautiful. I just thought, somebody saw her. Somebody was either stalking her or something happened. But I was just so angry that somebody could possibly do something like this. It had to have been somebody I thought who was very sick.
There was nothing really that drew anyone's attention to any issues that Savannah had at work, and nothing came of it.
Police canvassed the apartment complex the next day, searching for witnesses.
We didn't find anyone that said that they'd heard any struggle or screams to corroborate when that attack may have occurred. There were 2 security guards that were assigned to the complex. It was a multi-unit under construction.
So after I got the names of the security personnel who worked that night, which was about a week after we originally responded out there, I talked to the security guard first who worked the midnight to 6:30 shift. His name was Chuck Doyle.
According to Doyle, security was hired to ensure the residents were safe and to overlook any construction sites and that sort of thing for theft.
Chuck tells investigators on a usual shift he would drive through the complex and also patrol by foot.
I asked him how he found out about the murder of the woman, and he said he found out through the company. I asked him if he knew the lady who lived there, showed him 2 pictures, and he picked out the picture of Savannah Anderson.
When asked about his dealings with Savannah, Chuck's answer gives investigators cause for concern.
He indicated about a month prior that he'd helped Savannah gain entry into her apartment and slid a window open for her.
It was notable that Mr. Doyle had said he was aware that at least at that time one of the windows was unlocked.
Doyle said, "You'll find my fingerprints on Savannah's window, and this is the reason why." Immediately, we printed him. It really made me zero in on him as a potential suspect.
A week after Savannah Anderson was found bludgeoned to death in her bed, security guard Chuck Doyle has drawn suspicion after admitting that his fingerprints are likely on her unlocked window.
She had locked herself out of her apartment before, contacted him while he was on the site to see if he could help her get into the apartment. The security did not have any pass keys. He found that a window was unlocked. He was able to slide the window open. He also said that he didn't go inside. It could be for a couple of reasons. Could be perfectly innocent that he didn't go inside. Could also be to say, well, I didn't go inside if he may have somehow be involved in the death.
Had Chuck slipped in through the same unlocked window to kill Savannah? Police press him for his movements that night.
Chuck Doyle said that he reported for duty on the 14th at midnight, or was supposed to, indicated that he was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes late.
He was supposed to replace a security guard named Bob Sellers.
He drove by Savannah's and saw her talking on the phone. He thought maybe that was around 12:15 or so, 12:20, but was not certain.
He went and parked next to Bob Sellers' car. About 12:30, he estimated, Sellers approached. He got daily reports from Sellers, and then Sellers went ahead and got in his car and drove off.
When detectives ask what happened next, Chuck's answer raises even more suspicion.
He said he drove around a while, went back to the carport, and went to sleep, which would seem very odd.
He thought he probably nodded off for a while.
Doyle says that he was awoken by a car door slam. It was Sellers who had returned and invited him to breakfast. Doyle says it was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. They went to breakfast at Spire's restaurant, a 24-hour cafe.
The cafe is just 10 minutes from the complex.
Doyle said that he was dropped off by Sellers at about 2:30 in the morning.
Chuck says the rest of his shift was uneventful, and he clocked out at 6:30 a.m.
There's just something really unusual about the sequence of events that's being described by Doyle.
Investigators are left with more questions than answers. Did Savannah die on Chuck's watch? Or was he the one who killed her? Hoping for clarity and to corroborate Chuck's story, they turn to the other security guard, Robert Sellers.
Robert Sellers enlisted into the Marine Corps at age 17. He's 22 now.
He was assigned that day to work from about 4 in the afternoon, and he was supposed to get off at about midnight that night. I asked him if he knew who Savannah Anderson was. He said he had talked to both her and her boyfriend that evening.
Sellers told me that he thought he saw Savannah around 10 p.m. on the phone.
Robert confirms that Chuck was late for work, so he didn't leave the apartment complex until around 12:30 a.m.
After leaving Doyle, he then went home, showered.
As a U.S. Marine, he was supposed to go to a Marine base at 6 o'clock in the morning.
He decided it wasn't worth trying to go to sleep, so he thought, well, I'll just go out to breakfast with Doyle. So that's when he returned.
Sellers told me that he came back to the complex about 3:30, which is an hour and a half or 2 hours after what Doyle recalled this happening. So there was this inconsistency between the both of them about what time they must have gone to the restaurant. Sellers said there was a waitress named Gail who waited on him. I took note of that. At the end of the Sellers interview, we asked if he would go ahead and give us finger palm prints, which he agreed to.
Investigators hope the autopsy report can help them pinpoint Savannah's time of death.
According to the coroner's report, Savannah Anderson died at approximately 2 a.m. on May 14th. The cause of death was strangulation.
She'd been struck on the head many times, found multiple contusions on her face. There was broken fingernails, a broken jaw, cracked teeth.
We did have biological fluids, semen that was found, but DNA was not in existence at the time, so we didn't have that tool.
My first thought was just how horrible to die like that. I cried and I was just very upset just thinking that something like that had happened to a person that was just so lovely. It's just terrible.
If Savannah was killed at 2 a.m., which security guard is telling the truth? Was Chuck really off-site like he claimed? Or was Robert right, meaning Chuck was at the apartment complex when the murder took place?
There was a wide gap and discrepancy between their two stories and timing. So the two were brought in together to try and determine if someone was mistaken about times.
They both basically stuck to their stories. I wasn't sure which either timeline might have been correct, whether it might have been Doyle's or Sellers, because they were just too far apart. So we thought at that time somebody was lying.
Detectives are investigating the disturbing murder of Savannah Anderson. The two security guards from her apartment complex are unable to agree where they were at 2 a.m. when Savannah was killed.
The timing is very sketchy between what Doyle says and what we learned from Sellers.
This is raising a lot of flags to me because why don't they know where they were and what time they were?
Going over time discrepancies, Doyle said, well, I slept. I could be mistaken. I'm not sure. So Sellers seemed to be more credible time-wise.
According to Robert Sellers, Chuck was on duty at 2 a.m., and the pair only went to Spire's restaurant around 3:30 a.m.
I asked one of the patrol guys to go ahead and try to contact any waitress there that might have been named Gail to see if she recalled the security guys coming in there at all. They weren't able to find a Gail that worked at the Spire's restaurant, so we could not identify that particular part of the story. It looked like the best chance of us determining who the suspect was going to be through the fingerprint and palm print evidence left behind. At this time, we already had fingerprints and palm prints from the boyfriend, Bill Mills, the boss, Ken Bergerson, and from the two security guards, Chuck Doyle and Bob Sellers. And I felt that if we can find out if any of those were the palm prints, that's going to be the resolution of our case. We'd be able to determine who had done it. So we sent them away with high hopes that we're going to be able to resolve the case once we get the results back.
While waiting for the results, investigators dig deeper into Savannah's life, hoping something will point to her killer.
Savannah seemed to be a very likable person who had, from all reports, a good mind, good IQ, personable, funny, one that you would be very happy to have as a daughter.
She was very sweet, very sophisticated, quiet. She had very strong values and morals. You know, she was just not one of those that was going to be out looking for trouble. Just how she went and how young she went is so tragic. Our world is, it's cruel.
We interviewed neighbors. Savannah had been at the apartment complex about 6 weeks. Her contacts, friends were very limited. What I learned through investigation was Savannah had moved deliberately for the safety of having security on the premises.
She really wanted a place that felt safe, and the fact that they had security, she loved that aspect of it. She felt really good about where she was going.
2 months after Savannah's death, police received the results of the finger and palm print analysis from the scene.
I was really hoping we heard back from the crime lab that it's going to be one of the guys we'd already talked to.
In terms of identification and finding and identifying that individual, it was everything.
None of the prints that came back were any of the fingerprints submitted from the bloody finger and palm prints. Really disappointing. Couldn't figure out why. It seemed like there should have been somebody in there that was responsible for it. Yet the crime lab is telling us that these weren't the responsible parties at all. We thought we had some viable suspect, but we're told, nope, it's not them. Well, now what? Wow.
The results mean Savannah's boyfriend, her boss, and the two security guards are all cleared.
I was very discouraged, but thought, okay, we just haven't come across the perpetrator. He's out there. We'll find him. We'll identify him. I feel comfortable with that based on the palm print.
Detectives immediately looked for people in the area that maybe had criminal histories. They looked at people that had been arrested after that for similar type of break-in crimes. And if they had any suspicions whatsoever, they would get their palm print and their fingerprints, and they'd compare them to the crime scene prints and then rule them out if they didn't match.
3 months after the crime, police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
The palm prints didn't match. It was extremely frustrating to work through this.
With the case threatening to turn cold, detectives refused to quit and take the case in a chilling new direction.
After going through potential suspects that were eliminated through the palm print, we began to examine that Savannah Anderson may be the victim of a serial killer known as the Bedroom Basher. This individual was responsible for 5 murders in the Orange County area at the time.
With a population under 2 million people, the number of attacks in a matter of months is troubling, and the similarities striking.
He would target young lone females between 17 and 35, ground floor apartments, open windows, open doors. Once inside, he would bludgeon, strangle, and sexually assault the females. So Savannah certainly fit that MO. And so we had to take a real strong look at perhaps she was the victim of this individual who had not been identified. We could be looking for a serial killer.
Detectives investigating the brutal murder of Savannah Anderson now believe she may have fallen victim to a serial killer.
Bedroom basher went after females in homes or apartments in the Orange County area, raped them, in at least one case, killed somebody by bludgeoning them, which is what happened to Savannah.
Based upon the number of bludgeonings in Orange County, which were 5, we felt that there would be another that would take place.
5 months after Savannah's murder, investigators' worst fears are confirmed when the serial killer strikes again.
During this time, there was a woman in Orange County that had been attacked, believed by the bedroom basher, who survived and was able to give a description to the police. A composite drawing was made. She described the perpetrator as a male, olive skin, pockmarked face, long hair, mustache, dark eyes, in his late 20s, early 30s. A task force was created in Orange County. Flyers were disseminated to the public and to patrol units. It resulted in multiple contacts of people who believed they knew who this individual was. Unfortunately, none of those resulted in the apprehension of the individual.
A year after the murder, with no arrests and a killer on the loose, women in the area live in a constant state of terror.
The community was definitely impacted by this terrible murder. The news was full of these kind of things, and it did create fear among people. The fact that I was living so close by, it's a little scary.
Any female who resided by themselves took extra precautions to ensure that their windows, doors were in fact locked. Every possibility we looked at, we were unable to make any headway in determining what happened to Savannah Anderson. It was extremely frustrating. There was no one else that we were aware of that could provide any insight and or potentially could be a suspect.
3 years after Savannah's murder, her case remains unsolved.
After you go through tips, leads, you step back, you re-examine, you say, what did I miss? It's got to be there. What did I miss?
I started to believe that they just weren't going to find out. And that's terrible to think that something like that could happen and that this person is out there roaming around still.
2 more years pass until a rookie homicide detective takes a renewed interest in the case.
Savannah's case was the first cold case that I ever worked. I was familiar with it because I was in patrol when it happened, and I thought, well, nobody's looked at it for a while. Maybe I should look at it.
A friend of mine who knows Larry Montgomery very well calls him the evidence whisperer.
I was aware he was looking at the Savannah Anderson case, and at one point he came to me and we compared notes on it.
After combing through all the evidence, detectives revisit whether Savannah was a victim of the still unidentified bedroom basher.
The possibility that she was killed by a serial killer was definitely looked at. I was looking at anything that I could use to direct me to a possible suspect. I'm looking at what was done at the crime scene, what did the suspect do with the body, what was maybe in his mind because of what he did.
In comparing Savannah's murder to those committed by the bedroom basher, something just doesn't add up.
The one thing that stood out that was not similar was the cleaning up of the victim.
When I look at a crime scene like this, it's somebody who has a desire for Savannah. She appeared uninjured other than towels on top of her face. It wasn't the gore that he liked. He had to kill her in order to get her into a position where he could fantasize about having an actual relationship with her. This is a real girl now as opposed to a dead body. The question in this case is, who did it? all the people we've looked at and that looked good were not matching the prints. There was one point where I started looking at the security guards to see what they were doing, because they were certainly involved in being there at the time. There were very big differences between what Doyle said happened and what Sellers said happened that night. And I thought that was very odd.
I thought at the time that I interviewed Doyle that one of the problems was he may have gone to sleep for a while. That would certainly account for the timeline being different, or his uneasiness in talking to us about that particular time period.
Police quickly locate Chuck and bring him in for another interview. His story about what happened the night of the murder is the same, but a few details stand out.
Doyle said that he got to the site probably 10 minutes late. He had not been able to find the person he was supposed to replace yet, Bob Sellers. About 12:30, Doyle saw Sellers come with a shirt in his hand, and I asked Doyle, did you ever ask him why he was late or why he didn't have his uniform shirt on? He said, no, he never asked him that. He just figures he's on his own time, so he could probably wear whatever he wants.
That's unusual. That right there's a big red flag.
That's not the only thing that raises alarm bells.
Doyle said that Sellers had commented about wanting to have a drink with Savannah. He thought she was very attractive.
Detectives asked Chuck Doyle if Robert Sellers ever confided anything else to him.
Regarding the relationship between Doyle and Sellers, they weren't buddies. They didn't do things together. They weren't really close friends.
Following this lead, investigators asked Chuck if it was common for them to go for breakfast during a shift, like they did the night of the murder.
They never did that before, so why is Sellers there on a night when he's supposed to leave soon to go to work at a Marine base, saying, hey, you want to go get something to eat? It didn't seem to fit, but I had the paperwork that shows that he had been exonerated. It wasn't his print. But I saw all kinds of things that Sellers did that was suspicious. Why is he here now at this time? It all fits if he came back and did something with the body at that time. It all made sense time-wise. And that's when I decided we need to find those prints again and see if we matched them properly.
"5 years after Savannah Anderson was found murdered in her apartment, cold case investigators suspect her killer has been hiding in plain sight the entire time.
I've got a suspicion that this guy, Robert Sellers, might be the guy, because there's too many lies or mistakes. He's already been exonerated, and I didn't believe the exoneration. We need to find somebody who's better than our sheriff's department, who's best in the world that we can get.
Robert's prints and the ones found at the crime scene are rushed to FBI headquarters.
The FBI discovered that some parts of the palm print were so thick with blood that it became a negative. It was the opposite of what it should be because of the thick blood. The thick blood looked like the ridges when really they were the valleys of the print.
The FBI reanalyzed the palm print and compared it to prints obtained from Robert.
The next day, the fingerprint lab at the FBI was able to identify in about 24 points of identification a positive identification of security guard Bob Sellers.
We have to arrest him now. Sellers, at the time that he was arrested, was living in a mobile home up in Brea at the police department. He was presented with evidence that his prints are, in fact, in the blood there. He didn't come forward right away, but very quickly, after he had some lies, he did admit that he did everything that we thought he did.
He was obsessed with her. He found her very attractive. He thought perhaps by going into her apartment that he might convince her of some romantic get-together. He gained entry into her apartment through an unlocked window where he could hear her on the telephone talking with her mother. He stayed in the bedroom, hid as best possible while she talked in the kitchen living room area. Once she got off the phone, at about a little after 12, she came into the bedroom. When she saw him, she was thinking, I have an intruder, a man in here, and I'm frightened. And he became frightened and realized that he had to silence her. He pulled out his baton and began striking her He then went to strangulation.
During the struggle with Savannah, he said that his shirt got bloody, so he had to take it off. So when he went to see Doyle, he had his shirt in his hand so that his replacement would not see the blood on it.
And then he goes home, gets cleaned up, sneaks back in, and then goes into Savannah's apartment. Sellers wanted her sexually. He had to kill her to get that. He did talk about he wanted her to be clean, and so that's why he drug her into the shower and washed the blood off of her and took her back into the bedroom and wrapped her head in towels because she was so badly beaten. So then he just had a body that was clean and he could have his fantasy. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he's trying to sneak out, and that's when Doyle sees him, and that's when, at the spur of the moment, he has to all of a sudden pretend like, oh, I'm here to go to breakfast with you, okay? He almost seemed relieved when he finally was able to confess that he actually did kill Savannah.
On March 29th, 1984, Robert Sellers is charged with murder, rape, attempted rape, and burglary.
I think after 5 years, he thought he probably did get away with it. In that time, he got married, started a family. The anguish that he caused with Savannah Anderson's death, he didn't deserve having that extra 5 years.
On November 4th, 1986, Robert Sellers is found guilty of first-degree murder and a special circumstance of rape. But his lawyers win his appeal.
His conviction was overturned on a technicality. The fact that the prosecution could not prove that she was alive during the rape changed the verdict for a life without possibility of parole.
Instead of a retrial, prosecutors offer Robert a deal. He accepts to avoid the death penalty and pleads guilty to first-degree murder. He is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Here you have a guard, a man, a Marine, placed there to protect the residents, and it turned out he is the one committing the crime. One would not expect the one who is protecting you to be your killer.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was. The irony of it all was the fact that she moved to this beautiful apartment complex thinking she was going to be safe and secure. And it was the security guard that actually did it. It was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Authorities don't find anything to link Robert Sellers to the bedroom basher killings. In 1996, Gerald Parker was identified and convicted of those crimes. In 1999, Robert Sellers died in prison.
I do feel there was justice, especially when I found out that he died after he had been in prison. That was justice right there. When I remember Savannah,
A beloved mother of four and high school teacher.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them.
Was a very special person. But I always wanted to be more like her.
Is found murdered, her body dumped miles from home.
As I got closer, you could see the outline of the body. I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal. It felt very personal.
Investigators try to piece together a mysterious crime.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom.
He said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping.
How could you not hear what was going on?
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
He was crying. He was emotional and said that he had a gun to his head.
And leads to a killer no one suspected.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this.
It was disturbing, very disturbing.
Olney, Texas, a tiny rural town with a proud history in aviation.
Olney, Texas was the home of air tractor. Crop dusting aircraft, they built them there.
It's a very small town, very close-knit. Pretty much everybody knows everyone.
It's an open-door community. Doors are unlocked. People are very welcoming.
On a warm summer morning in 2019, a terrible discovery shakes residents to their core.
The Young County Sheriff's Office received a call of a missing person, and the Olney Police Department was dispatched to the call.
Just before 10 a.m., officers arrived to find homeowner Peter Allen and his 2 children, Kiara and Darian. Peter tells police he's worried something terrible has happened to his wife, 49-year-old high school teacher, Manu Allen.
Peter told me that his wife was missing and that he had found a large amount of blood in their bedroom. And Peter told me that his wife's vehicle was gone.
Investigators head to the bedroom and are shocked at what they find.
As I got to the hallway, we started seeing signs of blood on the walls, most notably what looked like a handprint. And as we started going into the bedroom, we noticed there was a large pool of blood at the end of the bed and the knife on the floor. One of the things that we also noted in the bedroom is that there were no sheets on the bed, which seemed odd. There was blood splattered across the furniture, the mattress, the closet doors, and as we proceeded into the garage, you could clearly see drag marks. As we were in the kitchen, we did see what appeared to be a footprint. A picture started to develop that something very bad had happened.
As forensics begin processing the scene, police notify the DA's office.
My assistant district attorney, Philip Gregory, and I went out to the crime scene.
The carpets were pretty much soaked in blood. There was a lot of cast-off blood on the walls and on the doors, and it was a horrific scene to see. With that amount of blood, we were concerned that you're probably dealing with somebody who is deceased if they had not already made it to a hospital.
With no sign of the missing woman, investigators asked the family for more information about Manu Allen.
My mom was from a little village in southern Germany. She had 8 siblings. In the middle of my mom's college career, she came over to America to learn the language better. And my dad had seen her walk by, and my dad was like, "Ooh, who's that?" And while she was in America that summer, they spent like every day together.
Manu married U.S. Army veteran Peter Allen in 1996, and soon after, the couple moved to Crowell, Texas.
I came to know Peter and Manu when I was appointed police chief in Crowell, Texas, and Peter and I became good friends, and there was never no doubt that Peter and Manu loved each other very much.
Manu and Peter eventually settled in the small town of Olney with their 4 children.
My mom was a very supportive woman, but she was always pushing us to do our best.
Manu was one of the most respected teachers at Olney High School, teaching English and German.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them. And my mom should always be one to joke with the kids. Even my friends, she would help them if they needed help with their homework after school.
Now, the loving wife and mother has gone missing. Police asked Peter Allen the last time he saw Manu.
The night before, he and his wife sat down on the couch, watched TV, and then he went to sleep on the couch, and she retired to the bedroom to go to sleep.
Peter claims that no one noticed any sign of trouble until the morning.
According to Mr. Allen, his daughter, Kiara, had woke up. I believe that she needed to get some laundry done when the laundry room is through the parents' room. She noticed that there was some blood in the hallway area, and concerned about her mother, she went and woke up Mr. Allen on the couch. At that point, according to Mr. Allen went with her to investigate. He said that when he saw the knife, he drew the conclusion that she may have just been injured and cut. But clearly seeing the scene, a cut would not have produced the amount of blood, and it was very apparent that somebody was either severely injured or deceased.
Peter tells officers that he and Kiara went to the local hospital to look for Manu.
It did seem that it was out of place, the way that Peter went to the hospital first before calling law enforcement. There seemed to be a lack of emotion. He was very calm. So I pulled Officer Clark aside and I advised him. I said, we need to be very careful how we talk and handle Mr. Allen because he's potentially involved.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom. Mr. Allen was arguably within feet of the actual act occurring. There were 2 children that were inside the house too. And investigators were concerned that, hey, how could you not hear what was going on?
Peter and his 2 children are brought to the police station for further questioning. Meanwhile, officers are dispatched to nearby parks and wooded areas to look for Manu's car, a white SUV.
In the morning, a neighboring county deputy, Wilk, from Archer County, arrived, and he knows the Allens.
My oldest son, Wyatt, she was his teacher, and he thought the world of her. When I came through town on Main Street, I saw crime scene tape up around the Allens' house. And only you don't see crime scene tape up around houses that often.
As a typical law enforcement officer, he says, hey, what can I do to help?
I was asked to go out to Lake Cooper, look for a white SUV. I was given the license plate number, and when I pull into Lake Cooper and I go around to where the boat ramp is, I could see a white SUV on the other side of the lake where the dam is. So I got out, started looking at the vehicle, and activate my body-worn camera, take photos of the car, and I had noticed some brown smears on the car. And I thought, this looks like dried blood. So after I had photographed the car and the area around the car, I started looking around. So I took off walking towards the fence line. I looked to my left, and I could see a pile of clothes or blankets. And as I got closer, you could see the kind of the outline of the body wrapped up in these sheets and blankets. I felt the body. It was cold to the touch. Rigor had set in. They had my body camera going. And I think on my video camera, you can hear me take a deep sigh because I know that the Allens are going to get notified that their mother has been killed.
We received a phone call from Mr. Wilk.
I got a dead body out here at Lake Cooper.
That he had located the vehicle and a body.
Well, we have a whole crime scene back there at the house.
When we first arrived at the lake, you could see a outline of a white sheet over by the fence line.
Police confirm the deceased woman is Manu Allen.
Miss Allen had been stabbed multiple times, and a lot of stab wounds were to the head. I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal due to the amount of violence that was involved and the care taken in the way that she was moved and placed at the lake. It felt very personal. That started leading us to believe that it was somebody that knew her.
Coming up, suspicion falls close to home.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom.
He said he heard something in the middle of the night,
causing rumors to swirl through a small town.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around.
I said, I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this?
And investigators uncover new clues.
It was a communist block pistol, and it was semi-automatic.
Until a stunning admission leaves a family devastated.
It was just a shock that he confessed.
It was a nightmare.
The body of missing teacher and mother of 4, Manu Allen, has just been located at Lake Cooper, a recreational area a few miles from her home in Olney, Texas.
I'd been to homicide scenes before, but when you find somebody that you knew and your kids knew, when I did go home and told my kids that, hey, I was your teacher that was killed, that was hard.
Olney, Texas is that small community where you don't expect this sort of violence at all. There had not been a murder there in the last 10 years.
As they continue their investigation, detectives examined several items of evidence, trying to piece together what happened.
The vehicle had turned down a little offshoot and was approximately 20 feet from the road, and whoever was driving the vehicle had tried to turn the vehicle around and got high-centered.
Police believe that after the SUV got stuck, Manu's body was removed from the car.
The body was found within sight of the vehicle, and there had been yucca leaves placed around the facial area. If you have a body where the eyes of the face are covered, it typically means that the person who has been involved in the death somehow knew this individual.
When a killer does this type of behavior, it's because they're trying to show some sense of respect to the deceased.
Forensics process the body and collect fingerprint evidence from Manu's vehicle.
There were fingerprints that were located on the car that were in blood. When you find these, it's you can say the golden ticket for law enforcement, because whoever was involved in this left their signature behind.
Another detail in the field grabs detectives' attention.
There was a bicycle track that was leaving from the area of the vehicle onto the main road.
Is it possible the killer had perhaps left on a bicycle?
It being a recreational area, there is the potential that it could have been just a person riding through the area, but you're going to collect as much information as you can.
Investigators catch a break when they find a witness who supports their discovery.
There was an oil field worker that worked on the road that comes right out from the lake heading into Olney, and he happened to see very early in the morning someone on a bicycle wearing dark clothes with a backpack heading towards Olney from the lake area.
While officers are dispatched to track down the cyclist, detectives inform Peter that his wife's body has been found and closely watch his response.
Mr. Allen, his emotional reaction was a little different than what you would expect.
Mr. Allen was extremely detached, emotionless. He said that, he wanted to get justice for Manuela and that he had multiple firearms and a lot of ammunition that he could bring to bear if he did figure out who had done this, and that he was going to do what the military had taught him to do. As a law enforcement officer, I get mixed messages from that. When you start saying that you're going to go after whoever did it, you have to wonder if he's trying to point the investigation in a different direction than on him.
Based on the crime scene, detectives believe that Manu was killed in her bedroom and removed from the home in the early morning hours. They want to know how this could have happened with Peter in the next room.
Mr. Allen said that he had been drinking vodka, and then typically, if Mr. Allen had been drinking, he would not sleep in the same bed as Miss Allen.
Mr. Allen said that it was common for him to sleep on the couch because he snored a lot.
Peter claims the only time he woke up was around dawn when he thought he heard his wife's car starting.
He heard it and he didn't think anything of it. Mr. Allen indicated that it's not his job to check on where she's going.
And he apparently went back to sleep.
Police want to know how he heard a car start, but not his wife being attacked just feet away.
Obviously, there was a violent struggle within the bedroom, and Mr. Allen was within shouting distance, hearing distance of the struggle.
Mr. Allen had talked about how the incident may have occurred and that struggles can be silent, and that might be a reason why he didn't hear what had happened.
That's another cause for concern for law enforcement when you've got a suspect with a potential explanation for every possible fact.
Wondering how the killer escaped in Manu's car, investigators ask where she kept her car keys.
Mr. Allen, he indicated that those keys were not kept in the bedroom. They were kept in kind of a common area in the kitchen.
When asked why anyone would want to kill his wife, Peter has a theory.
During the interview with Mr. Allen, he had indicated that it was well known that he had a large gun collection, and he had spoken to a lot of people about it.
Mr. Allen was concerned that someone was breaking into the home to steal his gun collection.
Police are skeptical as they found no signs of forced entry and were not aware of any stolen items.
Well, as a law enforcement officer, I felt that Mr. Allen might be trying to steer the investigation. He had been drinking vodka that day. He was feet away from where the murder had occurred. He was very concerned about things that, in my mind, would not be of importance from somebody that had just lost their wife. So that made him rise to the top as a potential suspect.
Detectives believe that before Manu Allen's body was dumped at a nearby lake, she was stabbed to death in her bedroom while 3 family members were in the house. But her husband Peter insists he detected no sign of trouble.
Peter Allen, Manu's husband, said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping on the couch.
Skeptical of Peter's version of events, police want to speak with his children, Darian and Kiara, to see if they witnessed or heard anything. They start with his 15-year-old daughter, Kiara.
She said she was out with her boyfriend and that her father let her in the door around 11:30 that evening.
Her bedroom is where she went, which was right next door to her mother's room. She had put earbuds in her ears and had a phone call with a friend of hers and fell asleep with those in her ears.
Kira said that she never heard any screams or anything that alerted her that something bad was going on in the home.
Kira said she woke up that morning and she was trying to get to some clothing that she had washed, and the layout of the house would have required her to go through the master bedroom into the utility room, but the door was locked. And she said, Dad, the door's locked and I'm seeing blood over here. And that woke him up rather quickly. She said he asked her to go around to the other door in the garage and try to get in, but then when she did, she was met with just the scene of the blood in the bedroom and everything else.
Kiara did walk through the bedroom and she did touch some items of evidence.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom to examine it. She said that she did not see any blood or anything on it. Of course, picking up any kind of evidence is concerning. It leaves her information on the knife.
Investigators next interview Peter and Manu's 20-year-old son, Darian.
He said that he arrived back at the house at about 11:45 and then just went up to his bedroom. He said, I was playing a video game pretty much the whole night through, so I had my headphones on.
Darian said he had not heard anything other than he heard something in the middle of the night, but he just thought it was his father in the kitchen getting something.
According to Darian, he didn't find that unusual, so turned his attention back to his game.
There were 3 family members that were in the house. It was difficult for me personally to believe that they could not know that something serious is going on in a bedroom that's within 20 feet from you. I can't explain that.
When you have all these people in the home when this occurred, you have to rule them out individually.
Fingerprints and footprints can either rule people out or you can rule somebody in. And unfortunately, it's not like watching a crime TV show where the case is figured out in 15 minutes. It might take months to get returns on some of these items.
Peter and Manu's other children, 21-year-old William and 18-year-old Melanie, arrive at the police station anxious for news about their mother.
They wouldn't let us see my dad. Probably after 5 hours of waiting, they finally let my dad in, and then my dad told us that they found her body. It was a nightmare.
At the time of the murder, Melanie Allen, the older daughter, was actually at Six Flags that evening, and they never returned home that night. William Allen, the oldest son, was a student at Tarleton State University, and he was in Stephenville the whole time.
Both William and Melanie insist they have no idea who would want their mother dead.
I didn't think anyone would have a single thought about hurting my mom.
You have to talk to the children naturally to see if they can give you any idea of other red flags or things that might have been going on in the home.
Investigators were concerned about simmering unresolved conflict that may have led to a murder. But when the children were interviewed, none of them ever described seeing Mr. and Ms. Allen having any kind of a noteworthy fight.
Police tell the Allen family that they're free to go, but they can't return home until forensics finish processing the house.
The next day, there was a lot of evidence that was collected. The investigators took fingerprints, footprints, in addition to the handprints that were on the wall leading back towards the bedroom.
Detectives zero in on an interesting detail.
It appeared that the perpetrator had left the bedroom and had gone into the kitchen to specifically retrieve something because there were not that many footprints in that kitchen. And the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept.
So whoever had done this knew where they kept the keys.
48 hours into the investigation, the autopsy report provides chilling new insights into Manu's last moments.
The autopsy revealed that Manu Allen had sustained roughly 47 stab wounds, the majority of which were to her head. She did have some defensive wounds on her hands.
However, it wasn't the stab wounds that proved fatal.
She also had suffered strangulation, and a great deal of force had been used, so much so that portions of the neck had been broken.
The autopsy report contains one final insight into the killer's brutality.
They did find a post-mortem gunshot wound in her facial area.
If you look at the totality of what happened with Miss Allen, the stabbings, the choking, and then finally the bullet, we knew we needed to get this suspect caught as soon as possible.
2 days after Manu Allen's murder, detectives have learned that in addition to being viciously stabbed and strangled, she was also shot once in the face.
There was a post-mortem gunshot fired at the lake after the body was moved to where her final resting spot was.
There was a bullet casing that was recovered from that particular area, and the actual bullet.
Police bring this new evidence to the crime lab, hoping to identify the gun used to shoot Manu. As people in the town of Olney await news of an arrest, rumors start to fly in the close-knit community.
There's a group on Facebook called Rants and Raves, and you will hear whatever is on somebody's mind about anything that's going on in town. And a lot of people were very hard on the Allen family.
It was really tough waiting for answers because other people in the town all wanted to point fingers at my dad. People looked at him differently. They would look at all of us differently.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around. A lot of discussion about Mr. Allen's past, his prior military. A lot of people felt that Mr. Allen was potentially involved in the homicide of his wife.
His children stand by him, but some of Peter's friends doubt his innocence.
When I'd heard that Manu had been killed, I'm instantly thinking car wreck or something. So I called Peter's phone. And we hadn't spoken in quite a few years. Melanie answered. And I said, Melanie, what's going on over there? She said, well, Mom's been murdered. So I told her, I said, I'm on the way. I had some concerns about Peter and his military background. Peter, from time to time, drank hard liquor. I'd never seen him violent, but my thought was maybe something had snapped. Maybe there had been infidelity in the family or something. When I got there, I said, Peter, I need to know now. I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this? He looked me square in the face, nose to nose, and said, I had nothing to do with this, bro. You know I couldn't do it. And it led me to think, who could have done this? It was disturbing.
Detectives get a fresh lead when they receive new information on the cyclist seen leaving the area where Manu's body was dumped.
The day that the body was found, an oil field worker, around 6 o'clock in the morning, he saw a person headed from Lake Cooper riding back towards Olney on a bicycle. The local bank had security cameras on the outside of it, and a surveillance video showed somebody riding in town on a bicycle dressed up in shorts with a backpack. The video footage that was received from the bank, it was from a distance, so you were not able to see a face for identification purposes. You could see it was a younger person. It was definitely the person that everybody was wanting to talk to, but we did not know who that person was.
The quest to identify the suspicious cyclist hits a dead end, and pressure continues to mount on the police.
The community's in a lot of pain. We were kind of in a situation where we can say, hey, we're investigating this, we have leads, we're working on them. Please be patient with us.
As police await analysis of the bullet and casing found at Lake Cooper, they call Peter back to the PD and ask him about his gun collection.
Peter Allen had told us that he had weapons and ammunition in the house and that they were stored in his bedroom in a closet.
Peter tells investigators not all of his guns are locked in the safe. He also keeps a loaded pistol in a dresser drawer.
It was a communist block pistol that would have been from like the Soviet Union, and it was semi-automatic.
Police never found this gun when they searched the house. Had the killer stolen it? Or had Peter staged it to look this way?
It felt as if Mr. Allen was trying to lead the investigation. But investigators are naturally going to start looking at other firearm thefts or burglary cases that have occurred in the area.
Investigators look into recent gun thefts around town.
Corey Taylor was a local kid there that had been in trouble, and it was learned that just before the murders had occurred, he had been involved in a burglary that involved firearm theft.
Had Corey entered the house to steal Peter's guns and killed Manu in the process?
Mr. Allen had maybe over 100 firearms in the house, so that became a potential motive for the killing.
So we go to Corey Taylor's house. When I got to his apartment, Corey came to the door and told him that I was there so that he could be interviewed about the murder of Miss Allen. Corey indicated that he did know Miss Allen from school.
Officers asked Corey for his whereabouts the night of the murder.
His alibi was totally void of having any contact with the Allen family residence whatsoever.
As Corey speaks, officers see something suspicious.
I noticed a bicycle, and the tire mark from the bicycle, it looked very, very similar to the tracks at the lake.
It had the exact tread that was seen out at the lake close to Manu's body and the vehicle.
So a red flag went up there.
Detectives working the homicide of Manu Allen have noticed a suspicious bike in the apartment of 17-year-old Corey Taylor. Could Corey be the cyclist from the surveillance video?
One of our investigators was able to see a bicycle, and he's actually able to take a photograph of the treads on it, and everybody was kind of like, oh, that's probably the bicycle we're looking for. Mr. Taylor denied that it was his, but he indicated that the bicycle was actually owned by a guy named Julius Mullins.
Corey Taylor said that his friend Julius Mullins had dated Manu's daughter, Melanie.
Detectives are curious if Corey is trying to deflect blame. They press Corey for more information about his friend, Julius Mullins.
Julius was a running back for the Olney football team, and so as far as the community, he was known.
Julius Mullins was well-liked by the other team members. He seemed to have some success on the field, but Julius Mullins did not always have the best home life.
Julius didn't have a stable home. I know his relationship with his parents were strained.
He had stayed with Corey Taylor some, as well as the high school gym, because the coaches had allowed him to stay there because he did not always have a place to stay.
Police learned that Julius knew Manu from school and had dated her daughter Melanie for a year.
He was a good person. My mom was extremely kind and accepting of Julius. She would help him with his homework. One time, he got kicked out of his house, and she let him even stay the night.
Despite Manu's love and support, Julius's behavior had changed in recent months.
Things just started going downhill. He just started doing worse and worse in school. He started getting in more fights with his parents. Him and I started getting in more fights. And I finally left him probably 6-7 months before what happened.
Police bring Julius in for an interview and notice some alarming details.
Julius Mullins, he had some cuts and scrapes on his arms and legs, which would be consistent with someone who had been out by Lake Cooper. There were a great deal of yucca and cactus plants, and you couldn't have gone through that field without getting scratched up by the shrubbery.
Mullins had indicated that the night of the murder that he had went to a party with several other people. After the party, he said he went to Corey's apartment and crashed for the evening, but he had not seen Corey that night. So the alibi was pretty weak.
Julius Mullins admitted that he owned the bike that was at Corey Taylor's home. The bike places Julius Mullins out at Lake Cooper where the body had been left, because those tire tracks matched that bike perfectly.
So with any murder investigation, the interviewers in these cases are going to press pretty hard to get to the information.
Detectives asked Julius for more details about his alibi and the injuries on his arms and legs.
As they're finding inconsistencies in the stories, they're going to start breaking these stories down and get him to eventually just tell the truth. He was crying. He was emotional. And Mullins finally admitted that he had killed Miss Allen. At that point, Mullins started giving the information that was pertinent and matched what we had found at the scene.
Julius tells police he had gained entry to the Allen home through a faulty garage window.
Mullins accessed the garage and went into the bedroom of Miss Allen. I believe Miss Allen was surprised when Mullins started the assault. He continued to assault her, and she fought for her life. Mullins stabbed her multiple times and then eventually choked her to death. He then took the sheets off the bed, wrapped her up so that he could move her.
Police believe Julius then found Peter's Soviet-made pistol in the dresser drawer and headed to the kitchen to grab Manu's car keys.
He then drug her through the laundry room, through the garage, through the backyard, out to the alley, and loaded Miss Allen into the car. He loaded his bicycle into the car with him, and he drove her to the lake.
Julius planned to hide the body far from the road, but the vehicle got stuck on the rough terrain.
So he put together a hasty plan and pulled her out and drug her to a fence. He then took the gun and fired one shot, hitting her in the face to ensure that she was dead. And then he took his bike and he fled the scene. It was a sigh of relief in some respects that he confessed. Mullins did indicate that he was still in love with Melanie and was upset about that. We asked him why he would want to kill the woman he loves, mother. And Mullins said that he had a gun to his head. According to Mullins, on the evening before the murders had occurred, he said that he had gone to Allsup's and had run into Peter Allen in the store, and Peter had him come outside into Peter's car. and Peter had pulled a gun on him and pressed it to his chest and told him to kill Miss Allen, and that if he did not do it, that his whole family would be killed. He said that was the reason for committing the murder.
Julius Mullins has confessed to the murder of Manu Allen, but claims that he was forced into it by her husband, Peter.
Mr. Mullins gave very specific information about them meeting at an Allsup's convenience store, where Mullins said Mr. Allen pretty much just pulled him into his car and said, "Hey, you're going to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to go kill all your family."
When Mullins made these accusations toward Mr. Allen was still a person of interest.
Police try to verify the alleged meeting between Julius and Peter.
We were able to secure the phone records of Julius Mullins back to the day that Mr. Allen supposedly threatened Julius into murdering his wife, and were able to determine that Mr. Mullins' phone was nowhere near that Allsup's location at any time that day.
Police interviewed Julius again to clarify his allegations against Peter. He insists he's telling the truth and provides more shocking details about the murder.
He said that after Miss Allen was dead, that Peter assisted him in wrapping the body and pulling her out to the alleyway and then loaded her into the car.
Detectives receive forensic results and check if Julius's account matches the evidence.
There were some bloody handprints and some fingerprints, and they had footprints that they had sent to the crime lab, and they were eventually identified.
Forensic testing determined 2 people had left footprints in the kitchen. One set was left by Julius.
Julius had been in the home frequently when he was dating Melanie, and the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept in the kitchen, and Julius would know that.
Investigators wonder if the other prints belong to Peter, but the results show otherwise.
Kiara left footprints, but she said that she had stepped in the blood, so that lined up with what she had said had occurred.
The crime lab also determines fingerprints left in Manu's blood in the house and on her car belong to one person.
Sure enough, they belong to Julius Mullins. We were able to rule Peter Allen out.
The things that Mullins attempted to implicate Peter in, the physical evidence did not support that. The cell phone data did not support that.
The results were confirmation that Mr. Allen had nothing to do with this.
Avery Mark?
Manu was my life. She was my soulmate. And I don't think any human being alive could expect for the heart, the soul, the core of the family to be murdered without reason whatsoever. I knew they were going to look at me because I was the husband and I was in the house. When the police made the arrest, there was disbelief. I just didn't think he had it in him to do something like that.
On July 15th, 2019, 18-year-old Julius Mullins is charged with the murder of Manu Allen.
My daughter Melanie dated him, and Julius would come over. My wife was very kind to Julius. We were both nice to him. I was not worried about Julius at all while they were dating. He seemed more like a pleasant young man.
With Julius in custody, police find Peter's stolen pistol at the home of Corey Taylor.
They did investigate Corey Taylor, but he was ruled out. No fingerprints, no footprints, no DNA, nothing. The sole perpetrator of the crime was Julius Mullins.
Police believe the knife found at the scene may have been dropped by Julius, but forensic analysis found it was not used in the murder.
Staff at the school had found Mullins' backpack with a knife that was eventually determined to have been involved in the murder of Miss Allen.
Tragically, no one in the house heard Julius's vicious attack on Manu.
Kiara put earbuds in her ears and fell asleep with those in her ears. Darian was upstairs playing video games with a headset on, and then Mr. Allen, he had consumed alcohol, and that might have contributed to him sleeping heavier than normal.
Julius Mullins was charged ultimately and pled to murder in the first degree. And he also pled to the abuse of a corpse.
Julius receives a 55-year prison sentence.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this, especially to someone who has been so kind to them.
I was totally shocked that it was a person that had been trusted in their home. It was a person that Manu had assisted with tutoring and personal family issues that were going on with them.
Was robbery the motive? Was revenge the motive? I don't think we'll ever know, unless Mullins decides to tell us why he did what he did.
The only thing I can think of is he felt that if he killed Melanie's mother, that it would break her heart. A twisted revenge is the only thing I can think of.
It tore me apart, and my dad was, of course, completely torn apart. They were supposed to spend the rest of their lives together.
I love to smile, I love to laugh, I love to make jokes, but I haven't laughed or smiled like I did with her since it happened. There are generally two types of love. The one type is where you've been with somebody for a very long time, so you got that deep love. And then you got the other kind of love, which is the infatuation type love. And I had both of those for my wife. There is no such thing as moving on from it. I'm making progress, and my kids are making progress. But I'll never move on. That day will be stuck in my head till the day I die.
Loving father of two.
Era muy buen padre, la verdad.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
Is ruthlessly killed outside his home.
There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso.
Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
Detectives hunt a cold-blooded murderer.
We identified the weapon as an AK-47.
He received a text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
People were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
The question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved?
Then, one phone call changes everything.
He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us.
We thought, wow, this is the first break that we've had.
Exposing a killer no one saw coming.
It hit you in the gut. It was somebody that you just never really would have expected.
Le quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón.
Mammoth Lakes, California, a pristine ski town in the Sierra Nevada mountains.
People come out here to vacation. They come out here to go skiing, snowboarding, and in the summer months, it's hiking, bicycling, fishing.
It's beautiful. The weather's always sunny. There's always an outdoor aspect that is just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
One early fall morning in 2016 turns into a nightmare for the town of Mammoth.
Mammoth Lakes Police Department received a 911 call at approximately 1:50 in the morning, reporting just hearing a series of rapid gunfire and that a neighbor across the street had been shot.
Police and first responders raced to the scene.
Patrol officers found the victim lying in the driveway, and he was lying face down in his own blood.
You had an individual who'd been shot multiple times, and the victim's wife standing there, and she's hysterical.
Y yo quise abrazar a Omar, me acuerdo. Y alguien dijo, no lo toques, no lo toques. Yo le dije, pero ¿y por qué no? Si es mi esposo. Quiero saber que él esté bien.
Paramedics arrive and try to resuscitate the victim.
La ambulancia llegó rápido, pero como Omar recibió muchos disparos en el cuerpo, Omar ya había muerto cuando ellos llegaron.
Police Police learn the victim is 35-year-old Omar Hernandez, and a homicide investigation is launched.
When I arrived on scene, I've never seen anything like that. Omar had approximately 15 gunshot wounds to his body.
There were bullet impact marks all over. In total, there was 30 shell casings that were found.
The victim was laying alongside his vehicle. There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso. His vehicle was still running, coffee cup still laying there, all indications that he was getting ready to go somewhere.
What was also noticed was there were divots that were in the asphalt and in the driveway.
We definitely got the feeling that as the victim laid there, he was continuously being shot.
I felt like it was extremely personal. Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
The shell casings provide another surprising but valuable clue.
The caliber of the bullet that was used, that only comes from a high-powered assault rifle.
It was a 7.6 millimeter round, so we believed it had to be an AK-47. To have a weapon of that sort here in Mammoth, I thought was extremely unusual because those are assault weapons. Those are not hunting rifles.
We thought it was potentially gang-related, possibly some sort of hit that somebody definitely wanted to get the job done.
Could this have been a planned execution? Detectives try to speak with Omar's wife, Gladys.
Gladys was hysterical, extremely upset, unable to talk, and she was screaming.
Estaba devastada por mi dolor, devastada por el dolor de saber que Omar había muerto. Y estaba pues perdida porque decía, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué le hicieron esto a Omar?
Born in 1980, Omar was raised by a single mother in Guadalajara, Mexico, but knew his destiny lay elsewhere.
El sueño de Omar era exacto, venir a Estados Unidos, porque sabía que aquí había más oportunidades. Su visión era crecer, salir adelante y sacar adelante a su mamá.
When Omar was 18 years old, he headed to Mammoth on the advice of a friend, and for 8 years had been successfully working his way up at the same company.
Omar had a good job here in Mammoth. He was a supervisor at Devon's grocery store, which is the main grocery store in Mammoth Lakes.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
At work, Omar was known to be a kind and caring, almost big brother figure to a lot of the employees that he supervised. He took them under his wing and really tried to help them feel like they belonged.
In 2006, Omar met Gladys Gastelum, and romance quickly blossomed.
Lo conocí y amor a primera vista. Sentí que era una gran persona, un hombre increíble.
Omar and Gladys started a family, welcoming the arrival of 2 sons.
Omar, como padre, era fantástico. Era muy, muy buen padre, la verdad.
The young family had a bright future, starting with an event planned for just days after Omar's murder.
Venía toda mi familia de México. Íbamos a bautizar a Mateo. Yo estaba emocionada por el bautizo de mi hijo y porque venía toda mi familia.
Instead of a celebration, Omar's loved ones must now organize a funeral. Looking for answers, detectives questioned Gladys about the hours leading up to the shooting.
She had gone to visit a family member, and Omar stayed home, and she came home right around 10 or 10:30 p.m. that night, and Omar was sleeping.
He was trying to get a good night's sleep before the night shift.
According to Gladys, at approximately 1:30 in the morning, Omar had gotten up, made himself some coffee, and went outside to start the car, to warm it up.
Omar siempre entraba a despedirse y me dio un beso y me dijo, te amo.
And then, shortly after he exited the back door to go to work, she heard the loud gunfire that made her jump up.
Se escucha una ráfaga de muchos disparos y yo me paro asustada. Yo nada más pedí a Dios que no fueran para Omar, que cuidara a Omar porque iba saliendo de mi casa.
So she got dressed really quick, ran outside, and that's when she saw Omar lying face down in the driveway.
Ella empiezo a gritar ayuda, por ayuda, ayuda, ayuda. Y le dije al vecino, llama al 911, porque Omar no está bien, algo le hicieron a Omar. Le dije, le dispararon a Omar.
When police ask if anyone held a grudge against Omar, Gladys's response is immediate.
The name of Saul Morales came up. Saul Morales had a problem with Omar because Saul had always accused Omar of having an extramarital affair with his wife, Rosalinda, who was also an employee at the Vons supermarket.
About a year or so before the murder occurred, investigators learned that Saul had actually gone to Omar and Gladys's home trying to confront Omar over whether these affair rumors were true.
There were disputes between Omar and Saul.
Gladys tells investigators that Saul's behavior had been disturbing.
Saul had confronted her, told her that my wife is having an affair with your husband.
She noticed that he had been driving by the house on a regular basis.
Gladys says she had seen Saul drive by her house as recently as just 3 days before Omar was killed. Things became so bad, Gladys tells police that Omar filed a restraining order against Saul.
That was an attempt for Omar to get Saul to stop coming to his house, stop contacting his wife.
Could Saul's jealous rage have driven him to murder?
Gladys indicated that she was afraid of Saul, and she thought maybe he was so upset over this alleged affair that he possibly could have killed Omar.
And so Saul became a person of interest pretty quickly. At that moment, we felt like, okay, maybe this is the guy.
Coming up, investigators uncover a menacing grudge.
He hated Omar.
He was there to teach Omar a lesson.
Not his motive to murder somebody.
And shocking clues.
The sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
It was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
The shell casings recovered were fired from the same gun.
Before a surprise confession reveals a cold-blooded killer.
He described how he just continued to shoot.
Nunca imaginé que él hubiera hecho algo tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
That was alarming. I knew right then it was huge.
Hours after 35-year-old father of two, Omar Hernandez, was gunned down in his own driveway, his wife Gladys has pointed police towards a possible killer.
Saul Morales was the first suspect in this case because his wife, Rosalinda, had reportedly been having an affair with Omar.
We found out that Saul confronted Omar about the affair.
Saul told Omar to leave his wife alone.
Omar was upset that Saul had come over to his house while his kids were home.
There was a fight that broke out between them and police were called.
Officers arrived on scene and they were separated. No charges were filed, but there still was a documented incident. Gladys did not believe that Omar really did have an affair with Rosalinda. But the important thing was if Saul believed it to be true, then that is motive to murder somebody.
Needing more information about the alleged affair, investigators head to Omar's workplace.
The co-workers described Omar as a nice guy that got along with everybody.
The manager described Omar as a very hard-working person dedicated to the job, was that employee that worked over and beyond what was required of him.
The manager did tell me that he had heard the rumors about Rosalinda and Omar's extramarital relationship, and also he did bring up the fact that at times he would see Saul in Vons walking through the aisles as though he wanted to catch Omar and Rosalinda together.
Learning Saul's wife, Rosalinda, happens to be working her shift at the store, detectives pull her aside for an interview.
She was very, very emotional.
Rosalinda found out about the murder when she came in to work and became very upset.
Investigators confront Rosalinda about the rumors.
Rosalinda denied that there was ever an affair or that there was any sexual relations between her and Omar.
She said that her and Omar's relationship was purely platonic and that her and him had been best friends, and that's the extent of their relationship.
Rosalinda definitely gave me the sense that she was nervous.
In talking to Rosalinda, she appeared to be holding back.
At this point, investigators weren't sure whether the affair was a rumor or whether it was true.
It seemed like the jealousy involved in the case could have been enough for murder. When you see a murder that gruesome, with that many bullets and that much violence, it comes out of some strong emotion.
Police know that even if Saul had motive for murder, he also needed the opportunity.
We asked Rosalinda where Saul was the previous night, and Rosalinda said that Saul was in bed with her the whole night, and then she ended up getting up for work around 3 that morning, and he was still in bed.
I wouldn't say that that particular alibi was rock solid, so interviewing him was very important, just to find out if their stories matched.
Investigators bring Saul down to the station.
When I interviewed Saul, he was extremely calm, extremely courteous, and extremely cooperative.
He was very forthcoming about the altercations that had occurred with Omar in the past, and that he was afraid that Omar had had an affair with his wife.
Investigators ask Saul to account for his movements in the hours leading up to the murder.
Saul claimed that he had gone to visit his uncle, and he was with his uncle throughout the night before coming home, and went to bed right around 11 o'clock that evening.
He said that he was asleep in his bed on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with it. He voluntarily provided a DNA reference sample to exclude him.
Getting DNA from Saul was extremely important because he was a prime suspect in the shooting, and because with fingerprints coming off the bullet casings, you could match the DNA.
Saul also allows detectives to search his home.
I searched the house for weapons, ammunition, or any evidence that could tie him to the crime. But I never found anything that would lead me to believe he had weapons or ammunition in the house.
When the results come in, Saul's DNA does not match the DNA found on the spent shell casings.
His story seemed to be making sense. It seemed to be consistent. There was no indicators that he was lying to us.
And so we didn't have anything to really move on.
I didn't find him to be suspicious. He just wasn't connecting the dots for me. And from my training and experience, he did not give me any indication that he was involved in the shooting. And so that was really frustrating.
With detectives forced to put Saul on the back burner, they revisit the theory that Omar's murder could have been a professional hit.
The weapon used, the AK-47, it's a weapon of murder, a weapon of violence, and so the nature of that weapon alone made people think this has something to do with a gang.
Because of the brutal nature of the crime, something we were looking at, is this the cartel? Is this a paid hit? It's got to be big because of the way it was done.
Police investigating the ruthless shooting of Omar Hernandez outside his home in Mammoth Lakes, California, now suspect he might have been targeted by a criminal gang.
There was speculation that maybe this was a drug deal that went bad and the cartel had come up and put a hit on Omar. Investigators went looking through Omar's background to see if there was any drug affiliations or anything that could have been tied to organized crime.
I didn't find anything in Omar's background that would indicate he had any gang association whatsoever.
No pertenecía a pandillas, él era una persona tranquila, no usaba drogas, no usaba nada.
Investigators move on from the gangland hit theory. Several days later, they discover their security camera footage from a building near Omar's home and hope the video will provide new leads.
The closest camera that had any video surveillance was several hundred yards down the street, so you were capturing vehicles coming and going.
Unfortunately, there were no cameras that were able to actually capture the crime as it occurred.
What the security footage documented was a vehicle circling the area several times prior to the shooting.
We had what we believed was a light-colored four-door sedan. We felt pretty confident that it was a Toyota Camry or Toyota Corolla. We felt like that vehicle possibly was involved.
Police spot another suspicious vehicle in the footage.
There was a red sedan-type vehicle that was seen at the intersection driving down towards the victim residence.
What was notable was it appeared less than 2 minutes prior to when the murder took place, and then the sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
Unfortunately, with the low image quality, we weren't able to identify who was in the suspect vehicles.
Undeterred, police show the footage to Omar's wife, hoping she can identify the vehicles. The red sedan provokes a strong reaction.
Gladys said that the day after the shooting, a red sedan drove by with two people inside of it that she recognized as Vaughn's employees. She did say that they gave her a slow roll type of look, as though letting her know they were watching her, or maybe even they were involved.
Sentí miedo en ese momento porque cuando ellos pasan manejando y luego le hacen así, yo sentí mucho temor, sentí miedo.
Gladys told investigators that the two individuals in the car were Jose Antonio Correas Vasquez and Eliud Correas Vasquez. They were cousins. Gladys knew Eliud and Jose Antonio as co-workers of Omar's.
At the time, their reputation was that they were MS-13 gang members from El Salvador.
Detectives head to Vaughn's to talk with Jose Antonio and Eliud's co-workers.
Employees did tell me that Omar was the supervisor for the Salvadorians, and it appeared that they didn't like Omar, they didn't like taking orders from him.
Investigators learned that Omar had been promoted to a management position a few months before his murder, and that there was constant friction between him and Eliud.
Eliud and Omar did not get along. In fact, there had actually been an incident between the two of them where Eliud had been sent home for not doing his job properly.
Eliud became so upset that he contacted the union and made a formal complaint against Omar.
Did Eliud take matters into his own hands with deadly consequences? There's one more detail about him that raises suspicions.
Eliud drove a red sedan, and it seemed to be a possible match to the car that was on the surveillance video. However, when we looked closer at the red sedan and Eliud's red sedan, it was clear immediately that they did not match, and that was not Eliud's car in that surveillance video.
With Eliud looking less likely as the killer, investigators turn their focus to his cousin, Jose Antonio.
He claimed to have some association to some gangs. We subsequently served a search warrant at his residence. We did find assault weapons, although they ended up being imitation airsoft type weapons, so obviously they weren't involved in the actual murder itself.
We didn't find any definitive ties to Salvadorian gangs. I think it was just their bravado, and they had a heavy reputation, and they knew people were afraid of them.
Without anything concrete linking Jose Antonio or Eliud to Omar's death, detectives are forced to move on.
That was just super frustrating. It just seemed like at every corner there was something that we thought was going to really point us in the right direction and really break the case open for us, and it just was another dead end.
Just as the case threatens to hit a wall, investigators scouring Omar's cell phone activity make a jaw-dropping discovery.
In combing through thousands and thousands of text messages, we did find many text messages where he and Rosalinda spoke to each other, and it became very clear that the rumors of the affair were definitely true. It also became apparent that not only was there an affair with Rosalinda, but that Gladys knew about the affair.
That was a cause for concern because initially the affair was denied by all parties at first when the investigation began.
The texts force investigators to rethink everything. Why did Gladys and Rosalinda lie? Were either of them trying to cover up for a crime? And had Saul learned the truth and done the unthinkable?
There was a lot of evidence that showed that there were enough emotional ties involved in that somebody could be angry enough to kill someone based off of that infidelity.
Weeks have passed since father of two, Omar Hernandez, was brutally gunned down. Detectives have just obtained proof a rumored affair between Omar and coworker Rosalinda did actually take place.
Omar was involved romantically with Rosalinda, and through cell phone forensics, we located text messages that definitely confirmed that Omar had a conversation with Gladys as well about the affair that confirmed that she knew about it.
Gladys had previously told police there was nothing to the rumored affair, so investigators had to speak to her again.
When we asked Gladys about the affair, she broke down crying, and she confirmed the rumors to be true.
Gladys described how she found out about the affair with Rosalinda back in 2014. She had returned home early from a trip to Mexico, and when she came back to their house, Omar wasn't there, but there was burned wax and rose petals on the bed, on the floor around it, and she knew they weren't for her. So a couple days after, she ended up going through her husband's phone and found the text messages between Omar and Rosalinda, which confirmed to her that he had an affair.
Detectives asked Gladys why she lied to them before. What was she trying to hide?
Her reasoning behind lying about the affair was simply to protect Omar's reputation. He had a good reputation, and she wanted to maintain that. And also, according to Gladys, they were working through their problems to keep their family together.
She just didn't want to have anything negative to say about her husband. He'd been brutally murdered. She kind of wanted to leave it at that. Let's investigate and try to figure out the person responsible.
Police are also curious why Rosalinda had been untruthful and bring her into the station.
And told her we knew that she did have an affair with Omar. She told us that she lied because she was embarrassed about it, but also that she didn't want to inflame things with Saul.
We asked her whether he knew about the affair or not. She confirmed that he did know about it. She was definitely concerned about her husband.
I asked her flat out if she believed that Saul may have killed Omar, and her answer to my question was, I don't believe he pulled the trigger. So of course that was alarming. I thought maybe I missed something at the beginning, and that there was a potential that Saul may have actually even hired someone to kill Omar. It presents difficulty because then you have to backtrack and look at the initial suspect once again and make sure you haven't overlooked anything.
Investigators re-look at Saul, but after combing through phone records and texts, find no evidence he hired anyone to kill Omar, or that he committed the crime himself.
At this point, the evidence did not bear fruit that Saul was the suspect we were looking for. His alibi checked out. There was nothing else that ever came up that pointed him as being the one who did this.
Saul is cleared once again. With yet another busted lead and no arrest in sight, police have to contend with the fear that's gripping Mammoth Lakes.
It was pretty hard for the community to have all these investigations going on and talk of murder and gossip of violence and the things that led to it, but no answers, just dead ends. I think people genuinely were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
Afectó a la comunidad porque todos vivían en pánico. porque todos se preguntaban por qué pasó esto, por qué en un pueblo tan chico, donde nunca había pasado nada así. No había explicación y pienso que la gente sí tuvo miedo.
Despite months of tireless work, investigators run out of leads.
The case essentially went cold. There was nothing to indicate any one person was responsible.
At this point, we're well over a year into the investigation, and the question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved? It starts to weigh on you because we've formed relationships with Gladys, and we want nothing more than to bring justice for her family.
It definitely wears on you as an investigator. You constantly ask yourself, what did I miss? There's got to be something there that I missed.
Fue uno de los puntos más difíciles para mí también. Pero siempre tuve fe de que algún día, dije, así pasen años, se va a solucionar porque no puede quedar la muerte de Omar impune. De esa manera como él murió, no puede quedar así.
We had always been feeling that if we could just get that one piece of information that could lead us to the suspect, we'll develop the rest. But we needed somebody to come forward and give us a break that we needed to solve that case.
2.5 years later, detectives receive just that. An explosive phone call that upends the whole case.
In June 2019, a person called and said that they know who killed Omar and has some concerns for their own safety.
In my mind, I felt that that's the big break that we needed. Sometimes that's all it is. One person with information. I knew right then it was huge.
2.5 years since the brutal slaying of Omar Hernandez, an informant has come forward with information that blows the case wide open.
A man by the name of Francisco Ramirez came into our office, and you could tell that something was scaring him. He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us. Francisco started telling us about this individual. His name was Josue Correas Vasquez, and he was a co-worker at Vaughn's. They both worked the night shift.
Francisco worked with Josue, and Josue was actually the brother to Eliud, and he describes this contentious relationship between Omar and Eliud and Josue. Months before the murder, says that they were constantly butting heads with one another, described Eliud and Josue as constantly disrespecting Omar. Omar would delegate tasks that need to be completed, and Eliud and Josue would always be disrespectful and say, well, why do we got to do that? Nah, I don't think so. Was just constantly kind of challenging him.
Josue had actually told Francisco that he hated Omar because he had been disrespected and that he had threatened to fire his whole family, and that he had to take matters into his own hands. Then, just several hours after the murder had occurred, Francisco told us that he received a text message from Josue, and it said something to the effect of, "See, I'm not playing around." And then there was another text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
When he saw the text message, he felt very strongly that that is Josue's way of telling him he just murdered Omar.
Francisco then divulges another disturbing piece of information.
Francisco told us that he had actually gone shooting with Josue months prior to the murder. They had gone out in the middle of the forest, and that Josue had brought an AK-47 with him and were just shooting targets. When Francisco mentioned AK-47, obviously all of our ears perked up, as that's the weapon we were looking for.
And then several years after Omar was murdered, Francisco became the manager to take Omar's place at Bonds. And he's now in a position to where he needs to delegate, and he's now seeing the same disrespectful tone from Josue. At some point in time, he and Josue got into an argument, and Josue says something to the effect of, "Don't make me do to you what I did to Omar."
We asked Francisco why he is now just coming forward 2.5 years after the murder, and Francisco said that he was scared of Josue.
He was concerned for his safety, and he wanted to tell law enforcement about what he knew because he said, if something is to happen to me, I want you guys to know who's responsible.
Francisco realized, I could be the one that's next, and this guy needs to be stopped.
Detectives contact Gladys to gather more information about the working relationship between Omar and Josue.
Gladys did tell us that when Josue first came to the States, he didn't have a lot of friends, he didn't know very many people, and Omar had taken Josue under his wing.
Omar was kind to him, would bring him food for lunch breaks, really seemed to keep an eye on Josue and care about his well-being.
Siempre le ponía su lunch para que él comiera en Bonds y siempre me decía, oye Gladys, échale más lunch para convivir, para darle a Josué.
Omar and Josue seemed to get along for many months during that time period. But Gladys told us that once Omar was promoted to supervisor, things started to change between Omar and Josue.
Cuando a Omar le dan el puesto, sí sentía que algo había cambiado. La misma relación de amistad ya no era igual.
Omar had a job to do, and as Omar started giving more direction and instructions to Josue, Josue started to be a bit more belligerent towards him, talking back, refusing to do certain things.
There had been reported conflicts between the two, and that Josue had felt like Omar was on a power trip.
They didn't get along at work. They were constantly arguing with one another.
Could a workplace conflict have turned into murder? Investigators pull the employee timesheets for the night Omar was killed.
We went back through the Vaughn's records from that night to see when people clocked in, and we noticed that Josue did not work at all that night. We also looked into what vehicle does Josue drive.
Detectives are hopeful that Josue's car will be a match to one of the two vehicles spotted in the surveillance footage.
We determined that at the time of the murder in 2016, he did in fact own a 2012 silver Toyota Camry. That vehicle, shortly after the murder, had been resold to another individual. So we ended up finding that vehicle down in another part of California, and it was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
It matched the color and the make and model of what we were looking for.
At that moment, we felt that we had the person responsible for the murder of Omar.
Needing hard evidence to tie Josue to the murder, detectives head to the area where Francisco had witnessed him firing an AK-47.
It wasn't a designated shooting range. It was a dirt road off of a main highway.
We went out to the range where he said that he shot with Josue, and we were actually able to recover 56 cartridges that were just below the dirt. All of these cartridges were extremely important because as we grabbed the first cartridge we saw, it had the same head stamp of the cartridges found at the murder scene. When we found shell casings, it just really hit you in the gut.
We thought, wow, this is the first break that we've had.
Two and a half years after Omar Hernandez was murdered, investigators hope they finally got a break after discovering spent bullet casings that appear to match those recovered from the crime scene.
We found north of 50 expended projectiles in the dirt and sent those casings back to the laboratory for comparison.
After we compared the two casings together, one from the murder scene and one from the shooting range, the lab told us that they were fired from the same gun.
This is huge in an investigation. We have an identified suspect and we have physical evidence.
On January 30th, 2020, Josue Correa Vasquez is arrested for Omar's murder.
After Josue was arrested, we brought him in for an interview. We knew that the shell casings recovered at the crime scene were the same as the shooting range. What we didn't have was a way to tie that in to Josue. So what we decided to do was create a fake DNA profile that would be shown to Josue, and what it said was that we recovered DNA from the shell casings and that it matched somebody of the same age and ethnicity as Josue. The goal of having the DNA profile was in hopes that it would push Josue to tell the truth.
Detectives also use another tactic and make an emotional appeal.
Investigator Callahan actually had a photograph of Omar's children on his desk.
I showed him the kids, and I said, these kids, they don't deserve what happened to them. Let's try to give them some closure. They have no father. They just want answers. They want to know.
Josue stuns investigators with what he sasays next.
Ese día, como cuando ya el odio ya lo invade, ya siente, este día lo voy a hacer. There was a lot of hate against Omar from my part, and that's why me alone decided to kill him.
It was a monumental moment that we felt, okay, we've got the right guy.
The question remains, why would Josue commit such a heinous crime?
Josue told us he hated Omar. He hated that he would tell him how to do his job. He hated that he'd be tough on him.
He felt that he was disrespected by Omar, and he was there to teach Omar a lesson.
Josue proceeds to tell investigators what happened that fatal night.
You knew that Omar was going to work at 2 in the morning? He said that he drove by Omar's residence a number of times, confirmed that the vehicle in the video surveillance was in fact his vehicle.
He says he went around the block to see if he was home.
Just before 2 a.m., Josue parked across the street from Omar's home, and he waited for him to come out.
He saw Omar come out of his residence, and that was the moment that he'd been waiting for. He grabbed the AK-47 when Omar went to the driver's side of the door to leave. Josue emerged from the trees and yelled at him, "You don't look so invincible now, do you?" and described shooting him several times.
Eso fue lo que le dijo, que no era invencible. Que no era invencible.
He described the look in Omar's face, the surprise, the shock. How many times did you shoot?
Era mucho el odio. Le disparé todo el cartucho. Como al tercer disparo ya caímos. ¿Y seguiste disparando? Sí. He kept firing.
Josue said that after he murdered Omar, he went home, he went to bed. A lot of Josue's interview is matter of fact, which was chilling in and of itself, that you can have murdered somebody and just be talking about it in such an unemotional way.
Josue admits that several days after killing Omar, he told his brother Eliud what he had done.
Eliud was concerned about the murder weapon and whether it could be traced back to Josue. So Eliud took it upon himself to take the AK-47 to the forest and bury it so no one would ever be able to find it.
Based on Josue's confession, police bring in Eliud.
He eventually admitted to us that he did help dispose of the gun and gave us the details about where it was, and he pointed to the exact location where the firearm would be recovered.
So we dug right there and sure enough found an AK-47.
At this point, it's kind of a prosecutor's dream. We have a confession, statement from the defendant, and the murder weapon that we never thought we would recover just showed up.
For his part in the crime, Eliud is sentenced to a year in jail.
Eliud was charged as being an accessory after the fact. He was charged for helping dispose of the murder weapon and not telling authorities about it.
On January 18th, 2022, Josue is sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for the murder of Omar Hernandez.
El día de la sentencia sentí paz porque se estaba haciendo justicia de la muerte de Omar. Nunca imaginé que Josue hubiera hecho eso. Tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
The biggest surprise was that it was somebody that you just never really would have expected. Omar had taken Josue under his wing. By all accounts, Omar cared very much about Josue.
That's what was so troubling in this case. Omar lost his life, was brutally murdered for no reason other than he was a hard-working individual who had expectations.
A mis hijos les quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón. Eso nos arrancó Josué.
Omar's family still feels the deep